Most men don't fail because they're weak. They fail because pressure exposes something they never trained to control. Watch it happen in real time. A challenge, a confrontation, a moment where respect is on the line. Their jaw tightens, their voice changes. They rush to explain, to react, to prove, to defend. And in that moment, before a single word lands, they've already lost. Pressure doesn't crush men. Pressure reveals them. It reveals who needs approval, who needs to be understood, who cannot sit in silence without collapsing inward. Because the man who breaks under pressure is not overpowered by the world. He is betrayed by his own nervous system. And the man who remains calm, who does not rush, justify, or perform, becomes untouchable without lifting a finger. If this feels uncomfortably accurate, stay. What comes next is not motivation, it's a dismantling. And once you see how pressure actually works, you won't respond to it the same way again. Pressure doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It slips into ordinary moments wearing familiar faces. A look of disappointment, a sharp question, a challenge framed as concern. And most men respond the same way. Their body tightens before their mind can intervene. Their breath shortens. Their thoughts race forward, searching for the fastest way to relieve the discomfort. They think they are responding to the situation, but they are actually responding to an internal alarm that has been training them since childhood. Pressure is not the enemy. The enemy is the reflex. The reflex to move, to speak, to explain, to regain emotional balance as quickly as possible, even if it costs authority, respect, and long-term power. You've seen it happen, maybe in yourself, maybe in others. A man gets questioned in a meeting and immediately starts over-explaining details no one asked for. Another feels disrespected in a relationship and raises his voice, mistaking intensity for strength. Another is challenged publicly and laughs nervously, signaling uncertainty instead of confidence. None of these men believe they are breaking. They believe they are handling it. That's the illusion. Breaking under pressure doesn't look like collapse. It looks like movement. Uncontrolled movement. Pressure exposes who cannot remain still when their identity feels threatened. And stillness is the rarest skill in a world addicted to reaction. The body always reacts first. Before logic, before strategy, before pride. Stress hormones flood the system, narrowing perception and shortening time horizons. Under pressure, most men become focused on one thing, making the discomfort stop. They don't think in terms of leverage or position. They think in terms of relief. Say something. Do something. Fix it now. This is why pressure is such a reliable filter. It doesn't test intelligence or morality. It tests nervous system control. The man who cannot regulate his internal state will always surrender control externally. He will talk when silence would dominate. He will justify when detachment would intimidate. He will act when waiting would win. Here is the uncomfortable truth most men never hear. The world does not reward those who handle pressure emotionally. It rewards those who handle it quietly. Calm under pressure is not politeness. It is dominance without aggression. When you remain composed while others react, you create asymmetry. You become the reference point. Others start adjusting to you. Most men think power is displayed through assertion, volume, or force. In reality, power is displayed through the absence of urgency. The man who does not need to rush sends a signal that he is safe, grounded, and unmovable. Pressure only defeats those who feel compelled to respond to it. This is why pressure situations feel so personal. They don't attack your logic, they attack your self-image. A challenge implies inadequacy. A question implies doubt. A delay implies rejection. And because most men tie their sense of worth to external validation, pressure feels like an existential threat. The moment their image is questioned, they scramble to repair it. That scramble is the break, not because the challenge was strong, but because the foundation was fragile. A man who knows who he is does not rush to convince others. He observes. He listens. He lets the moment unfold without inserting himself unnecessarily. Notice how pressure accelerates weak behavior. The more threatened a man feels, the more he explains. The more he defends, the more he exposes what he values. His tone shifts. His posture changes. His energy leaks. Pressure pulls the mask off, and once others see how easily you can be moved, they subconsciously test you again. Not always maliciously, often instinctively. Humans probe for stability the way water probes for cracks. Most men teach the world exactly where to push them by how they behave when pressure arrives. The men who don't break are not fearless. They feel the same physiological signals, the same tension, the same surge. The difference is what they do next. They don't obey the signal. They don't confuse sensation with command. They allow the discomfort to exist without reacting to it. This creates space. And in that space, power reorganizes. While others rush to speak, they wait. While others fill silence, they let it stretch. Pressure becomes one-sided. The person applying it begins to feel exposed, uncertain, and off balance. Control quietly shifts without confrontation. This is why pressure is a gift, if you understand it. It reveals who you are becoming. Every pressured moment asks the same question. Do you control yourself, or do you outsource control to the situation? Most men fail that test without realizing they were being tested at all. They think the test was about being right, being respected, or being understood. It was never about that. It was about composure, about restraint, about who remains intact when the environment becomes hostile. Pressure doesn't make you untouchable. Your response to it does. And this is where the separation begins. Because once you see pressure clearly, you stop fearing it. You stop treating it as something to escape. You stop trying to neutralize it with words. You begin to recognize it as a stage, a moment where stillness becomes visible, where authority reveals itself without declaration. Most men rush to end these moments. Untouchable men let them breathe. And the difference between those two reactions determines who leads the interaction and who follows it. Pressure has arrived. What happens next is entirely up to you. Pressure escalates when silence appears. This is something most men instinctively feel, but never consciously understand. Silence removes feedback. It removes reassurance. It removes the emotional signals people rely on to orient themselves. When you don't immediately respond, explain, or correct the narrative, the other person is forced to sit alone with their own thoughts. And most people cannot tolerate that. They interpret silence as judgment, resistance, or superiority, even when none is expressed. That's why silence is not passive. It's confrontational in a way words never are. It reflects uncertainty back onto the person creating the pressure. Most men rush to fill silence because silence feels like loss of control. They believe that if they are not actively shaping the moment with words, someone else is winning. This belief is backwards. The man who speaks first under pressure usually speaks to relieve himself, not to dominate the situation. His words are driven by anxiety, not intention. Silence, on the other hand, signals that you are not emotionally invested in the outcome. And emotional independence is the foundation of leverage. The less you need to resolve the moment, the more control you quietly hold over it. Watch how people react when their pressure doesn't work. They escalate. They repeat themselves. They become sharper, louder, or more exaggerated. This escalation is not strength, it's leakage. It reveals impatience and insecurity. They are trying to provoke movement from you, any movement, because movement confirms influence. When you don't give it to them, the power dynamic shifts. Suddenly, they are the one seeking resolution. Suddenly, they are the one exposed. The man who can remain composed while others escalate becomes the emotional ceiling of the interaction. Everyone else adjusts beneath him. This is where most men misunderstand confidence. They think confidence is certainty. It's not. Confidence is tolerance, the ability to tolerate discomfort, ambiguity, and tension without self-betrayal. Pressure creates discomfort. Silence extends it. And only a man with internal stability can survive that extension without flinching. This is why silence feels unbearable to insecure people. It gives their inner narrative room to run. They imagine judgment. They imagine rejection. They imagine loss. So they speak, to regain emotional equilibrium. The man who does not need to regain equilibrium already has it. Under pressure, people are not listening to your words as much as they are reading your nervous system. Your tone, posture, timing, and restraint communicate far more than your arguments. When you rush, you signal urgency. When you over-explain, you signal doubt. When you defend, you signal vulnerability. Silence interrupts this pattern. It removes cues. And without cues, people project. Often, they project authority onto the person who remains calm, not because he asserted it, but because no alternative explanation presents itself. This is why powerful individuals speak less, not more. They let others reveal themselves. Every extra sentence spoken under pressure is another piece of information surrendered, another emotional tell, another signal of what you care about protecting. Silence withholds that information. It forces the other person to move first, to clarify, to justify, to expose their intent. The man who understands this doesn't weaponize silence aggressively. He uses it neutrally. He allows moments to unfold without interference. And in doing so, he controls the pace, which is the deepest form of control. Pressure moments are not debates to win. They are frames to maintain. Whoever controls the frame controls the outcome. Most men abandon the frame the moment pressure appears. They step into the other person's emotional reality and start playing defense. Silence refuses that invitation. It keeps the frame intact. It says, without saying anything, "I am not destabilized by this." That message is felt immediately, even if it's never consciously acknowledged. And once that message lands, the interaction changes direction. There is a reason people remember the calm man in a tense room. Not because he spoke brilliantly, but because he didn't need to. His restraint created contrast. While others reacted, he observed. While others leaked energy, he conserved it. This contrast becomes authority over time. People begin to defer without understanding why. They trust the man who does not rush. They follow the one who seems unaffected. Pressure becomes his environment, not his enemy. And here's the final shift most men never make. They stop seeing pressure as something imposed on them and start seeing it as something revealed through them. Every pressure moment shows you exactly where your internal structure is weak, where you crave validation, where you fear misunderstanding, where you feel small. These are not flaws to hide. They are signals for training. Because once you no longer react automatically, pressure loses its grip. And when pressure no longer controls you, very few people can. At a certain point, something changes. Not in the environment, not in other people, but in you. Pressure stops feeling like an attack and starts feeling like information. This is the moment most men never reach because it requires abandoning a familiar addiction, the need to be seen a certain way. Once you stop trying to protect your image, pressure loses its leverage. It can no longer threaten what you're no longer defending. The man who is untouchable is not armored. He is unattached. Most men think they break under pressure because the pressure is too strong. That's a comforting lie. The real reason is simpler and more brutal. They care too much about outcomes they don't control. Respect, approval, agreement, being perceived as competent, calm, dominant, or good. Pressure targets these attachments precisely. The more you cling to an identity, the more pressure can squeeze it. Untouchable men reverse the relationship. They don't enter moments trying to secure an outcome. They enter grounded in who they are regardless of the outcome. This is where internal hierarchy matters. If your sense of self is above the situation, you stay intact. If the situation is above your sense of self, you fracture. Pressure reveals who has placed their identity in the hands of others. The man who needs validation will always be vulnerable to those who withhold it. The man who needs agreement will always react to disagreement. The man who needs to be understood will always over-explain. But the man who is internally settled doesn't need to move when pressure pushes. He lets it pass through without resistance. There's a quiet discipline behind this that most people never train. The discipline of allowing discomfort without interpretation. Pressure creates sensation, tightness, heat, acceleration. Most men immediately assign meaning to these sensations. They think, "This is bad. I'm losing ground. I need to act." Untouchable men do not confuse sensation with danger. They observe it without story. The sensation peaks, then fades, and because they didn't react at the peak, nothing was surrendered. No words leaked. No posture shifted. No authority was given away. This is why emotional mastery always precedes social power. You cannot dominate externally what you cannot regulate internally. People don't follow composure because it's polite. They follow it because it feels safe. In chaotic moments, humans instinctively look for the most regulated nervous system in the room. That becomes the anchor, the reference point, the leader, whether he claims the role or not. When pressure hits and you remain steady, others unconsciously adjust their behavior around you. They slow down, they soften, or they expose themselves trying to provoke a response. Pressure also reveals intention. When someone applies it and gets no reaction, they are forced to confront why they applied it in the first place. Was it insecurity? Control? Testing boundaries? Without your reaction to hide behind, their motive becomes visible. This is uncomfortable for them. That discomfort often manifests as backtracking, justification, or aggression. None of this requires you to respond. In fact, responding too early interrupts the process. Letting others show their hand is one of the greatest advantages stillness provides. There is a moment in every pressure interaction where the balance could tip either way. Most men panic at that moment and rush to decide it. Untouchable men do the opposite. They wait. Waiting is not indecision. It is confidence that time works in your favor. The longer you remain unmoved, the clearer the dynamic becomes. You begin to see not just what is being said, but why it's being said. And once you see the why, the pressure loses its mystery and its force. This internal shift does not make you cold or detached from life. It makes you precise. When you finally do speak or act, it's not to relieve tension, it's to direct the outcome. Your words land heavier because they are rare. Your actions carry weight because they are deliberate. People listen not because you demanded attention, but because you never needed it. Pressure trains this precision if you let it. Every moment you resist the urge to react, you strengthen the part of you that cannot be shaken. By now, the pattern should be clear. Pressure doesn't select the strongest men. It selects the most regulated ones, the ones who have disentangled their worth from the moment, the ones who don't need to win immediately to feel whole. This is not something you announce. It's something others feel when they can't move you. And once they feel it consistently, pressure stops being applied to you altogether. People stop testing what no longer responds. One part remains. Because being untouchable is not just about surviving pressure, it's about using it. And that final shift changes how every interaction unfolds from this point forward. Once you stop reacting to pressure, something subtle but decisive happens. Pressure changes sides. What once felt like weight on your chest becomes a force working in your favor. The same tension that used to destabilize you now destabilizes others. This isn't manipulation. It's physics. Energy follows resistance. When there is nothing to push against, pressure has nowhere to land. It rebounds, and the person applying it feels the impact. Most men think being untouchable means avoiding conflict, tension, or confrontation. That's wrong. Untouchable men don't avoid pressure. They invite it indirectly by not fearing it. Their calm creates a vacuum. People feel compelled to test it. They challenge, they probe, they escalate. And every escalation that fails to move you reinforces your position. Over time, a reputation forms, not one you announce, but one others spread quietly. He doesn't react. That sentence carries more authority than any declaration of strength ever could. Here is where pressure becomes leverage. When someone tries to rush you, slow down. When someone demands clarity, delay your response. When someone seeks emotional resolution, deny it by remaining neutral. This does not mean being unresponsive or dismissive. It means choosing timing over impulse. You speak when it benefits you, not when it soothes them. Timing is power disguised as patience. Most people give it away because they can't tolerate the space between stimulus and response. Pressure also sharpens perception when you're not consumed by it. You start noticing micro-shifts. Who grows impatient? Who softens? Who overcompensates? These reactions tell you everything about where the real power lies. The person who needs a reaction is not in control. The person who can wait is. This awareness allows you to navigate situations with surgical precision. You don't need to confront. You don't need to correct. You simply let people reveal their priorities through their behavior. There is a reason negotiations, interrogations, and high-stakes decisions favor the calmest person in the room. Not the smartest, not the loudest, the calmest. Pressure amplifies mistakes. When you are regulated, others make those mistakes for you. They speak too much. They concede too early. They expose what they want. Your restraint creates an uneven exchange. You receive information without giving any away. That imbalance is the essence of advantage. Eventually, pressure stops showing up the same way. People sense boundaries that don't need defending. They feel limits that aren't verbalized. This is not intimidation. It's clarity. You become predictable in one way only. You will not be moved. And predictability at that level creates trust and caution simultaneously. Those who respect strength respect you more. Those who seek control try less. Pressure doesn't disappear. It simply loses its teeth. The final misunderstanding to shed is this: being untouchable does not mean being emotionless. You still feel tension. You still feel the surge. The difference is that you don't identify with it. You let it exist without letting it decide. This separation is everything. Once you stop outsourcing your behavior to sensations, you reclaim authorship over your actions. Pressure becomes a signal, not a command. Most men spend their lives trying to eliminate pressure. The untouchable man trains himself to withstand it. And in doing so, he flips the dynamic entirely. Pressure becomes the environment in which others reveal weakness, and he reveals nothing. That is why he doesn't need to dominate, why he doesn't need to explain, why he doesn't need to justify himself. Because the man who remains composed when pressure demands reaction has already won, long before anyone realizes a contest ever existed. At the highest level, pressure no longer feels personal at all. It becomes impersonal, mechanical, like gravity, present, constant, predictable. And once you see it this way, you stop asking the wrong questions. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this moment revealing? That shift alone places you ahead of most men, because most men stay trapped in interpretation. They personalize pressure. They turn it into a story about disrespect, threat, or inadequacy. Untouchable men strip the story away and deal only with reality. This is the final separation. Most men experience pressure as judgment, while untouchable men experience it as data. Judgment collapses you inward. Data sharpens you outward. When pressure hits, you learn who is impatient, who is insecure, who needs control, who fears silence. You also learn who you are, where you still tense, where you still rush, where you still want to be seen a certain way. Pressure exposes the last attachments you haven't outgrown. And that's why it never fully disappears. It evolves as you evolve. There is a paradox here that few understand. The more untouchable you become, the less you need to prove it. You stop signaling strength. You stop performing confidence. You stop correcting perceptions. And ironically, this is when others begin to perceive you as powerful. Not because you demanded it, but because you no longer needed anything from the interaction. Need is always visible. Detachment is always felt. People instinctively defer to the one who is not seeking an outcome from them. Over time, your presence alone changes rooms. Not dramatically, not theatrically, subtly. Conversations slow when you enter. People choose their words more carefully. Challenges become indirect or disappear altogether. This is not because you intimidate others, but because you have become energetically expensive to test. Pressure no longer gets rewarded with reaction, and behavior that isn't rewarded eventually stops. This is the real payoff. Not dominance, not control over others, control over yourself. When you reach this point, you realize something quietly profound. No one can take power from you because you stopped handing it out. Not through explanations, not through emotional leakage, not through rushed responses, not through the need to be understood. You respond when it serves you. You remain silent when it serves you, and both are equally deliberate. Most men will never get here, not because it's impossible, but because it requires giving up familiar comforts. The comfort of reacting, the comfort of expressing, the comfort of being right in the moment. Untouchable men trade those comforts for something rarer: long-term authority, psychological gravity, the ability to remain intact regardless of environment. Pressure will still come. It always does. But it will feel different now. Less like a threat, more like confirmation. Confirmation that you are no longer the man who breaks, explains, or scrambles. You are the man who waits, who observes, who decides, And once you become that man, pressure doesn't define you anymore. It defines everyone else.